In the bitter cold winter of 2019, a young family living out of their car on the snow-covered streets of Manchester, New Hampshire, carries a seemingly ordinary Catholic medical center maternity tote bag wherever they go. To passing strangers on Elm Street, the bag looks like a standard piece of luggage for a family struggling with homelessness and poverty. However, this specific canvas tote bag never leaves the side of Adam Montgomery. He is a father who guards the heavy handles with intense and inexplicable paranoia. He brings the heavy bag into crowded homeless shelters and places it carefully into the trunk of a vehicle belonging to a friend. Most chillingly, he carries it into his job as a dishwasher and cook at the Portland Pie Company. During his long restaurant shifts, he stores the bag in the walk-in food freezer next to the daily ingredients. The horrifying truth is that this bag does not contain infant clothes or baby supplies, but rather a dark secret that will eventually spark a massive multi-state investigation. Before the heavy canvas tote bag becomes the center of a local tragedy, Harmony Montgomery is a bright and resilient young child with a radiant smile. She has a deep love for her younger brother and a gentle spirit that touches everyone she meets. Born in Massachusetts, she faces massive challenges from her very first days on Earth. She is visually impaired and wears distinct protective glasses that magnify her expressive eyes. Her early years are marked by severe instability due to the profound substance abuse issues plaguing both of her biological parents. Consequently, she spends much of her young life navigating the complex and cold Massachusetts foster care system. She moves from one temporary placement to another across various towns in the state. Despite the constant upheaval and the absence of a permanent bedroom, foster families describe her as an affectionate child who simply wants a stable home. She creates small pockets of joy in her daily routine and holds on to the hope of a forever family. Her resilience shines through the darkness of her circumstances every single day. She plays with her toys and watches her favorite television cartoons like any typical child her age. The adults in her life repeatedly fail to protect this fragile normalcy over the coming years. Her biological mother, Crystal Sore, battles severe personal demons and ultimately loses custody of her children to the state. The Massachusetts child welfare system attempts to manage the fragmented family, but the sheer volume of cases creates dangerous blind spots. Caseworkers document the chaotic environment, yet the massive bureaucratic system prioritizes biological reunification over the absolute safety of the child. Adam Montgomery. Her biological father resides across the state line in New Hampshire and has a documented history of severe substance abuse and violent offenses. He spends time in various correctional facilities and struggles to maintain basic employment or stable housing. Yet, he suddenly petitions the court for full legal custody of the young girl. This unexpected request initiates a catastrophic chain of events within the family court system. The legal framework designed to shield the most vulnerable members of society begins to fracture under pure bureaucratic negligence. The tragic path of this beautiful child is paved by administrative oversights and ignored red flags. She remains dependent on adults who view her as a pawn rather than a vulnerable human being. The most glaring systemic failure occurs in a Massachusetts family court in February of 2019. A judge makes a fateful and highly criticized decision to award full physical and legal custody to Adam Montgomery. This monumental transfer of custody happens despite his extensive history of violence and untreated addiction. Even more infuriatingly, the court bypasses a critical safety protocol known as the Interstate Compact on the placement of children. This mandatory legal process requires the receiving state to conduct a thorough home study and deep background check before a child crosses state lines. By skipping this crucial step, the Massachusetts court essentially drops the child into a massive jurisdictional void. No social worker in New Hampshire is ever notified of her arrival. No welfare checks are scheduled to ensure her new living conditions are actually safe. The safety net that Child Protective Services usually provides is severed by a single stroke of a pen. The rigid protocols meant to catch falling children vanish in an absurd paperwork anomaly. The judge clears the path for a known predator to take total control of a vulnerable life. Following the final court order, the young girl leaves the familiar surroundings of her foster homes and travels north to Manchester, New Hampshire. Manchester is a post-industrial city where grand brick mill buildings line the Merrimack River and quiet residential neighborhoods often hide deep economic struggles. She moves into a modest home on Guilford Street to live with her father, his new wife Kayla, and their other children. At first, the neighborhood seems like a typical suburban environment with peeling paint on older houses and the glow of sodium streetlights illuminating the sidewalks at dusk. For a brief period, neighbors observed the young child playing in the yard and seemingly adapting well to her new blended family. She steps into a household that projects a false image of typical domestic life to the outside world. However, behind the locked wooden doors of the Guilford Street residence, the family battles crushing financial ruin and profound drug addiction. The brief window of normalcy quickly closes as the household descends into total chaos. The young girl slowly stops appearing in the front yard and vanishes from public view entirely. The community goes about their daily routines, unaware that a child is slipping away into the shadows. The cold reality of her new life remains hidden from the very neighbors living just feet away. The silent tragedy remains undiscovered until November 18, 2021. On this crisp autumn day, Crystal Sorey contacts the Manchester Police Department with a frantic and desperate plea for help. She officially reports her daughter missing and details a chilling gap in basic communication. Crystal explains to the intake officers that she has not been able to see or speak to her child since a brief video call around Easter of 2019. Over 2 full years have passed in terrifying silence. She describes calling various state agencies and leaving countless unreturned messages for the elusive father. The police dispatchers take the initial report and forward the sensitive information to the patrol division for a standard welfare check. The responding officers review the initial file and immediately note the massive delay between the last known contact and the official missing person report. This strange timeline immediately raises massive alarms for the seasoned detectives on duty. A gap of a few days is somewhat common in bitter custody disputes, but a gap of over 2 years suggests a profoundly dark reality. The officers know that statistics are rarely kind to missing children after such a massive delay. Patrol officers initiate a routine welfare check by driving to the last known address of the family on Guilford Street. The physical geography of the neighborhood yields no immediate answers, as the house sits quiet and occupied by entirely different tenants. The current residents inform the police that the previous family was evicted from the property long ago and left no forwarding address whatsoever. With the physical trail running cold at the front door, investigators pivot to digital and administrative records to track the missing child. Detectives send urgent legal requests to the Manchester School District and the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. They wait anxiously for the government databases to return any sign of life or recent activity. The resulting paperwork reveals a chilling and absolute void of information regarding her existence. The young girl has not been enrolled in any local school district for over 2 years. Furthermore, medical billing records show she has not been seen by any pediatrician or emergency room doctor since her arrival in New Hampshire. The total absence of bureaucratic footprints absolutely terrifies the veteran investigators. A child simply does not exist for 2 years without leaving a single paper trail in modern society. The local authorities rapidly escalate their efforts and launch a frantic search to locate the father across the sprawling city limits of Manchester. In late December 2021, patrol units finally find him sleeping in a vehicle parked in the frigid winter air. Detectives bring him into the warm interrogation room at the police headquarters and begin a methodical questioning process regarding the whereabouts of his daughter. The man sits across the metal interrogation table and exhibits a calm, arrogant demeanor that deeply unsettles the investigators in the room. He provides a series of contradictory statements that change dramatically with every single follow-up question. Initially, he claims he has not seen the child recently, but then he quickly pivots to a very specific and fabricated story. He tells the detectives that he drove to Massachusetts and returned the young girl to the custody of her mother long ago. The detectives immediately recognize the obvious falsehood, as the mother is the very person who initiated the massive police search to begin with. His deception is calculated, but his lies easily crumble under the weight of basic police verification. The sheer audacity of his lie highlights his deep belief that he can outsmart the entire justice system. The police realize they are dealing with a deeply manipulative individual who is hiding a massive secret. This defining moment of blatant deception officially shifts the entire nature of the police response. The case instantly transitions from a standard civilian welfare check into a high-stakes, multi-jurisdiction, missing persons investigation. The Manchester Police Department activates major crime protocols and requests immediate operational assistance from federal authorities. Command staff establish a dedicated tip line and begin plastering the smiling face of the visually impaired girl across local television broadcasts. Detectives map out a massive grid of every single location the family occupied over the past 2 years, preparing for extensive forensic grid searches. The investigative team realizes they are not just looking for a lost runaway child. They are hunting for the truth hidden by a deceptive father who walks freely among them. The community braces for the worst as the true scope of the 2-year cover-up begins to slowly surface in the local media. The systematic failure of 2 distinct state governments is about to be exposed by the meticulous and relentless work of local detectives. Law enforcement officers begin interviewing extended family members and former friends to piece together the lost years. Every single piece of information points back to the terrifying reality that the father knows exactly where she is. As the calendar turns to the early months of 2022, the Manchester Police Department transforms their main precinct room into a command center. Detectives stand before massive whiteboards, mapping out the grid of the city. They pin photographs of the young girl alongside timelines of the previous 2 years to establish a clear chronological path. The investigative team initiates a deep dive into the administrative records of the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. They uncover a vast and terrifying bureaucratic void that allowed a vulnerable child to vanish without a single alarm. The Massachusetts Family Court transferred custody to the father without triggering the mandatory interstate safety protocols. As a result, the receiving state possessed no legal mandate to assign a social worker or conduct home visits. The paperwork anomaly created a perfect storm of jurisdictional neglect. Detectives realized the system designed to protect the fragile child facilitated her disappearance. Investigators spend weeks interviewing extended family members and former associates of the father. They piece together the hidden reality of the family living situation during the final months of 2019. The detectives face the daunting task of bridging a 2-year gap in the timeline with zero physical evidence. They must rely on human memory and scattered digital footprints to reconstruct a tragedy hidden in plain sight. The intense interrogations of former associates lead the detectives back to a specific and frigid week in December 2019. To understand the origin of the tragedy, investigators mapped the exact physical geography of a desolate parking area on Elm Street. During this period, the father, his wife Kayla, and 2 children live in a cramped Chrysler Sebring. The harsh winter temperatures force the family to keep the vehicle running for basic survival heat. Detectives learn that on December 7, a tragic and permanent turn of events occurs within the confined space of the sedan. The young girl experiences a basic bathroom accident inside the car. In response, the father turns from the front seat and strikes the child in the face and head with extreme physical force. He repeats this brutal physical assault over several hours while driving through the quiet streets of the city. The father looks at his wife and delivers a chilling statement. "I think I really hurt her this time." Instead of seeking emergency medical care at a nearby hospital, the father parks the vehicle and falls asleep. The young child receives no comfort or medical intervention as the winter night sets in. Her life slips away in the back seat while the rest of the family rests just inches away. The morning sun illuminates a grim reality inside the Chrysler Sebring as the father discovers the permanent consequence of his actions. Detectives uncover the agonizing sequence of events that follow the tragedy in the back seat. The father makes a calculated decision to hide the truth rather than alert local authorities. He purchases a standard red and white quartable cooler and places the young girl inside the plastic container. The family continues to live in the vehicle, with the cooler stored in the trunk for several days. On a freezing afternoon in late December, the city provides the family with an emergency room at the family's in-transition shelter on Lake Avenue. The investigators map the exact spatial layout of this specific shelter residence, noting the low ceilings and cramped sleeping quarters. The father carries the heavy cooler into the room and realizes the container takes up too much floor space. He removes the rigid ceiling vent grate and pushes the evidence into the dark crawl space above the drywall. The family sleeps in the room for several weeks just beneath the hidden tragedy. Neighboring residents in the shelter facility begin to report a distinct and foul odor emanating from the ventilation system. The maintenance staff schedules a routine inspection of the ductwork. The scheduled maintenance inspection forces the father to relocate the evidence to avoid immediate detection by the shelter staff. He removes the tragedy from the ceiling vent and places his daughter into a Catholic Medical Center maternity tote bag. The canvas bag features thick handles and a spacious interior designed for infant supplies. Detectives document how the father begins carrying this heavy bag with him at all times to maintain total control over his dark secret. He walks through crowded city streets and enters public spaces with the ultimate proof of his guilt slung over his shoulder. He accepts a job as a dishwasher and prep cook at the Portland Pie Company located on Elm Street. The restaurant features a bustling dining room and a large commercial kitchen with a massive walk-in food freezer. The father carries the canvas tote bag through the back door and places it on a metal shelf inside the freezing unit. He works long shifts just a few feet away from the bag. Patrons eat their meals in the dining room above, oblivious to the horrific reality sitting next to the daily ingredients. The father retrieves the bag at the end of every shift and walks back out into the freezing city air. The family departs the shelter system in the spring months of 2020 and secures a permanent apartment on Union Street. Detectives analyze the floor plan of the new residence and focus their attention on the small windowless bathroom at the end of the hallway. The father recognizes that he cannot keep the canvas bag forever and devises a meticulous plan to destroy the physical evidence. Investigators trace a specific purchase timeline to a local Home Depot hardware store on March 3. Store records show the father purchasing bags of lime, heavy-duty construction trash bags, and a battery-operated demolition saw with specialized metal cutting blades. He returns to the Union Street apartment and places the frozen canvas bag into the porcelain bathtub. He runs hot water over the bag for several hours to thaw the contents before initiating his dark work. The father uses the purchased tools and chemicals to alter the remains and reduce the physical evidence. He washes biological materials down the drain of the tub to ensure the plumbing system carries away the proof. He places the remaining evidence into the heavy-duty construction bags for final transport. The sheer calculation of this process demonstrates a profound lack of basic human empathy. The police investigation hits a massive legal hurdle as detectives attempt to build a concrete case against the father. The defense team representing the man launches a calculated legal strategy to shift the entire blame onto his estranged wife, Kayla. The defense lawyers highlight her continuous presence during the events and her failure to notify authorities for 2 years. They present a theory that Kayla committed the fatal assault and manipulated the father into helping her hide the truth. This aggressive defense tactic creates a factual dead end for the prosecution team. Detectives cannot rely on the testimony of a compromised witness to secure a conviction in front of a jury. The investigation encounters a strict legal barrier, as the burden of proof demands absolute certainty regarding who struck the fatal blows. The local media amplifies the defense theory, causing public confusion and threatening the integrity of the case. Investigators must return to the beginning and dismantle the false narrative piece by piece using unalterable digital facts. They focus their relentless efforts on securing independent technical data to corroborate the exact movements of the father. The detectives refuse to let the defense team weaponize the silence of a victim against the pursuit of true justice. The breakthrough arrives when investigators secure extensive digital records and surveillance footage to shatter the false defense narrative. Detectives draft sweeping legal subpoenas for the Home Depot security cameras covering the checkout lanes and the exterior parking lot. The high-definition video captures the father purchasing the specific demolition tools and lime bags with his own hands. The investigative team then pulls rental records from a local U-Haul facility spanning March 3 to March 4 of 2020. The financial documents confirm the father rented a large moving van under his own name during the exact window of the final disposal. To track the precise path of the rental van, detectives analyze toll data from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. The electronic toll cameras capture the distinct license plate of the U-Haul crossing the towering Tobin Bridge in the dark of night. The digital timestamps map a clear route from Manchester down to the coastal regions of eastern Massachusetts. The objective technical data proves the father orchestrated the rental, the route, and the entire disposal operation without the presence of his wife. The defense theory collapses under the crushing weight of concrete financial receipts and unblinking traffic cameras. The final piece of the chronological puzzle centers on the dark, marshy areas along the 26-mile path driven by the father. Detectives map the exact coordinates of the Rumney Marsh Reservation, a vast expanse of dense leads and murky water. The physical geography of the marsh provides endless hiding spots for a person seeking to erase a tragedy forever. The father stops the rental van along the desolate shoulder of the highway under the cover of absolute darkness. He carries the heavy-duty construction bags into the unforgiving landscape and abandons the evidence to the elements. The digital toll records show the U-Haul returning northbound across the bridge in the early hours of the morning. The father returns to the motel room where his wife waits in silence. He looks her in the eyes and delivers a final definitive statement. It is done. The investigators sit in the command center and realize the sheer magnitude of the deception they just unraveled. The father concealed the tragedy across state lines and walked among the public with absolute arrogance for 2 years. The endless hours of meticulous police work expose the chilling reality of a predator hiding in plain sight. The climax of the massive legal battle arrives in the freezing winter month of February 2024. The massive judicial proceedings take place inside a grand brick courthouse located in the center of downtown Manchester. The exterior of the building features towering stone columns and heavy oak doors that shield the interior from the bitter wind. Security deputies stand at the entrance and guide local residents through metal detectors to ensure absolute safety in the building. The physical layout of the main courtroom places the jury box on the right side of the room, facing the elevated witness stand. Adam Montgomery sits at the defense table, wearing a standard suit, presenting a calm and calculated physical demeanor to the watching public. He watches the proceedings with cold eyes, projecting an aura of complete arrogance despite the massive weight of the impending trial. The state prosecutors sit at the opposite table, organizing thousands of pages of printed digital evidence and forensic reports. A team of seasoned legal clerks assist the prosecution in managing the vast amount of paperwork required for the complex case. The room falls into a heavy silence as the presiding judge enters the chamber and takes a seat at the elevated wooden bench. The heavy gavel strikes the sounding block to signal the official start of the historic legal proceeding. The true criminal is forced to face the community he deceived for over 2 years. Kayla Montgomery walks through the heavy wooden doors and takes her seat at the witness stand to serve as the star witness for the state. She leans into the microphone and begins to deliver a harrowing, detailed account of the dark months following December 2019. She details the terrifying reality of living alongside the hidden evidence of a horrific crime in cramped vehicles and small apartments. She explains how the perpetrator placed the permanent proof of his guilt inside the Catholic Medical Center maternity tote bag. The jury learns that the man carried this heavy canvas bag into crowded public spaces and busy family shelters to maintain total control over the secret. He sat in local restaurants and walked down busy sidewalks while keeping the tragic burden hanging from his own shoulder. The prosecution displays clear photographs of the canvas bag on the large television monitors positioned in front of the jury box. The visual evidence forces the courtroom to comprehend the sheer magnitude of his daily deception. The man walked among ordinary citizens and purchased hot coffee while carrying the ultimate proof of a stolen future. The testimony paints a chilling picture of an individual completely devoid of basic human conscience. The jurors realize that pure evil often wears the mundane mask of a normal person waiting in line at a local store. The detailed testimony dismantles the false narrative constructed by the defense team. The defense attorneys stand before the jury and attempt to execute their planned strategy of shifting the total blame onto the estranged wife. The lead defense lawyer paces across the carpeted floor and initiates a relentless cross-examination designed to break the composure of the star witness. He points a finger at the witness stand and accuses her of orchestrating the fatal physical strike and manipulating the father into the massive cover-up. However, the state prosecutors anticipate this exact legal maneuver and introduce unalterable technical data to destroy the false narrative. The prosecution projects the digital toll records from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation onto the large screen for the entire room to see. The electronic timestamps prove the perpetrator drove the rental van alone across the towering bridge during the final disposal operation. Furthermore, the prosecution displays the hardware store surveillance video showing the man purchasing the demolition tools and lime bags with his own hands. The objective, financial receipts, and unblinking traffic cameras provide an impenetrable shield against the accusations of the defense team. The calculated attempt to paint the wife as the sole architect of the tragedy collapses under the crushing weight of concrete financial data. The state experts explain how the digital footprint of the perpetrator leaves zero room for alternative legal theories. The jury recognizes the desperate legal tactics of a cornered predator grasping for a final escape route. The objective truth shines through the fog of courtroom deception. The state prosecution team summons expert crime scene technicians to the witness stand to corroborate the spoken testimony with concrete science. The forensic investigators present the physical evidence recovered from the family's in-transition shelter located on Lake Avenue. They map the exact dimensions of the cramped residential room for the jury and point to the location of the ceiling vent above the sleeping area. The technicians explain how they removed the painted drywall and illuminated the dark crawl space with specialized ultraviolet lights during their deep search. The forensic examination revealed vital biological trace evidence belonging to the young girl soaked deep into the porous building materials. Furthermore, the crime scene experts discovered distinct fingerprints and full palm prints pressed into the thick dust inside the ventilation shaft. The forensic analysts detail the chemical reagents used to lift the prints and match them to the hands of the perpetrator sitting at the defense table. The physical impressions remain frozen in time, providing an unquestionable record of his actions in the dark ceiling space. The massive weight of the combined digital and trace evidence shatters the remaining arguments of the defense lawyers. The defense table sits in complete silence as the undeniable scientific proof is entered into the official court record. The trial reaches a definitive peak as the jury understands the absolute truth of the extensive cover-up. The meticulous police work successfully exposes the monster hiding in plain sight. The final legal resolution arrives in late February 2024 after the jury receives their specific instructions from the presiding judge. The selected men and women exit the courtroom and enter a secure deliberation room to review the massive pile of concrete forensic evidence. They spend several hours analyzing the digital toll records, the hardware store receipts, and the trace evidence recovered from the shelter ceiling. The heavy wooden doors open once again, and the jurors return to the wooden box to deliver a definitive verdict to the waiting public. The jury foreperson stands silent for a moment before reading the final decision regarding the fate of Adam Montgomery. The jury convicts the perpetrator on severe charges of the second-degree taking of a human life, falsifying physical evidence, physical abuse of a victim, and witness tampering. The courtroom erupts in quiet tears as the loved ones of the young girl embrace each other after years of agonizing uncertainty. The perpetrator displays zero emotional reaction to the reading of the verdict, maintaining his cold stare toward the front of the room. The state prosecutors pack their massive binders of evidence, knowing they secured a monumental victory for a vulnerable child. The local community breathes a collective sigh of relief as the dangerous individual is permanently removed from the streets. The justice system holds the arrogant man accountable for erasing a beautiful life from the world. The long pursuit of moral justice reaches a powerful conclusion inside the quiet courtroom. The final sentencing hearing takes place in the month of May 2024 inside the very same grand courtroom. In a final act of pure cowardice, the convicted criminal refuses to leave his concrete holding cell to attend the mandatory proceeding. He forces the judge to proceed with the legal formalities while an empty wooden chair sits at the defense table. The presiding judge looks at the empty chair and delivers a scathing verbal reprimand regarding his profound lack of basic human empathy. The judge sentences the man to consecutive terms totaling 56 years to life in the state prison system. The loved ones of the young girl step forward to the microphone and read powerful impact statements to the silent room. They detail the lasting psychological trauma inflicted upon the family and the sheer devastation of losing such a bright and resilient child. They speak of her infectious smile, her protective glasses, and the beautiful future that a cruel man stole from her. The emotional words echo through the chamber, painting a vivid picture of the massive void left by her absence. The empty chair serves as a stark reminder of the absolute cowardice that defines a true predator facing the consequences of his actions. The heavy sentence guarantees the man will spend the rest of his natural life behind thick steel doors and concrete walls. Society delivers the ultimate punishment to the man who betrayed his most sacred duty to protect his child. The justice system also addresses the legal culpability of the estranged wife for her role in the massive deception. Kayla Montgomery receives a distinct state prison sentence for multiple perjury charges related to her initial false statements to the local detectives. However, the state parole board reviews her cooperation during the trial and grants her supervised release from the correctional facility. She walks out of the prison gates as a free woman on May 3, 2024, to begin a new chapter. Meanwhile, extensive law enforcement searches continue across the vast coastal regions of eastern Massachusetts in a desperate bid to bring the child home. Search teams focus their immense resources on the dense reeds of the Rumney Marsh Reservation situated along the 26-mile final route. Detectives deploy specialized ground-penetrating radar and trained search dogs to scan the unforgiving mud and tidal waters for any hidden anomalies. The search grid covers massive sections of the wetland environment, requiring specialized equipment to navigate the deep water channels. Despite the massive deployment of state and federal assets, the physical remains of the young girl are never recovered from the desolate landscape. A probate judge reviews the overwhelming evidence of her permanent absence and declares her legally dead on March 12, 2024. The determined detectives refuse to close the missing persons file, holding on to the hope that a future clue will guide them to her resting place. The community builds small memorials to ensure her bright spirit is never forgotten by the outside world. The pursuit of absolute justice encounters a massive legal obstacle 2 years after the initial trial concludes in the local courthouse. On June 11, 2026, the New Hampshire Supreme Court issues a sweeping ruling that alters the entire trajectory of the case. The High Court justices review the trial transcripts and identify a specific procedural error regarding the initial legal filings made by the prosecution. The appellate judges rule that the trial court committed a misjoinder of offenses by combining the fatal physical assault charges with the subsequent cover-up charges. This complex legal loophole dictates that the jury should not have heard the horrific details of the cover-up while deciding the primary assault charge. The judicial decision forces the High Court to overturn the primary conviction, reducing his active state prison sentence to 43.5 years for the evidence tampering. The local community expresses profound outrage over the rigid legal technicality that disrupts the hard-fought victory for the innocent child. Legal experts debate the nuances of the appellate decision on local television stations while the original detectives watch in silent frustration. However, the New Hampshire Attorney General Office steps before the press to announce their unwavering commitment to the young victim. The state prosecutors declare their absolute intention to retry the criminal for the fatal physical strike in a brand new court proceeding. They promise to present the massive mountain of evidence to a new jury and secure a second conviction. The relentless fight for true justice continues against the tragic backdrop of a system that repeatedly failed a vulnerable child